This video is about taking this simple model by Dumas and doing a makeover, turning it into a high-detail static model. The picture on the left is the original Dumas model before makeover, and the picture on the right is the makeover. This is the finished model. It's all wood. There's a little bit of plastic in there. As you can see, it's quite a detailed model. The hulls are all basswood. The rudders are wood. The mannequin is something I'll show you in the video. The trampoline is made out of cloth, wood, and plastic. All the fittings were made by hand because they were not part of the model. All the rigging is done from jewelry wire that I bought at Michael's Arts and Crafts. The sail boom and the sail mast are made from wood and plastic. The plastic comes from report covers that you buy at Walmart. The reason for that was so that the sail would slide into the mast. There's no glue at the bottom of the mast. It's just sitting there and the wires hold it up just like the real boat. All these fittings on the corner I had to produce. I made prototypes and then I built them out. All the tackle and the rigging was made from plastic. The fabric in the sail is made from ripstop fabric. It's a nylon fabric. The stand was something I purchased at Michael's Arts and Crafts. I wanted to build a Hobie Cat like I sailed in 1974. This is a good model to start with. This is what the plans look like. As you can see, there's a profile of the boat. You got your trampoline, you got your hulls, and you got your sail. So you have a nice full size 1 inch to the foot scale. Some nice drawings for doing the hulls. And there's a nice top view. And this is a front view showing the hulls. I bought my model on eBay, and unfortunately there was a lot of parts missing. This is where the parts were punched out of the hull that were missing, so I was able to trace the parts that were missing and create my hull shapes that way. Building the hulls. I placed the plans down, covered them with wax paper to protect them against the superglue. Then I put the bulkheads and the pieces for the hull down and glued them with the superglue. The next step was gluing on the battens. I use a medium super glue. It's slower drying, but it gives you more time to line up everything and keep things square. This shows the battens after they've been glued up on both sides. And this shows the hulls after the panels have been put on the sides. I needed to drill a hole in the bottom of the hulls for the stand supports. So inside, I put a piece of wood as a stop, and I put some extra glue from a hot glue gun in order to make sure that the stand support did not poke through the top panel of the hull. I added some extra wood to create a larger surface for when I glued the top panels for the hulls. The top hull panels are glued in 2 pieces, one on one side, one on the other. I used basswood on the hull panel top. It will mean less filling and sanding when it comes time to finish the hull. The hull panel tops are larger than you need. You'll use your knife to trim them to size and sand them to shape. I needed to create a trim along the top of the hull. So I put down a piece of wood to create that lip. I then trimmed the hull top and sanded it to that surface to create a smooth, rounded surface, as you can see in this picture. Building the trampoline frame. In order to build a trampoline frame, I needed to construct something from scratch. The model kit only provided a few dowels in order to make a frame. I wanted much more detail. So I first started by making the end pieces that would hold the frame together. So I constructed this shape out of basswood based on photos of my old boat. Once I had a prototype, then I could make 4 pieces. They would be connected with wood dowels covered by plastic. The plastic is from book report covers. I needed the plastic report covers in order to slip the trampoline in once I had it constructed, and I cut them to the width that I wanted. The grooves that you see in the picture were sanded off smooth. In order to get the curve on the front of the boat, I used some hot water on the dowel, and the plastic I put some cuts in it in order to bend it. Once I had done that, I took the end pieces and the dowels and plastic pieces and assembled them. I used super glue and some weights to make sure that it would be the right shape to fit the hulls. I needed to make a step for the mast. I took a piece of wood, drilled a hole that would match up with the mast. I started shaping the piece using sandpaper taped to the trampoline frame and sanded it to fit. Once I had the shape, then it was ready to be glued later on. Before you paint the frame, there's a track for the traveler to go on. This is simply two pieces of wood on the stern side of the frame. Once the traveler track and the mast stem are glued in position, you paint the frame silver. Adding the trampoline to the frame. Your first step is to take some cotton cloth and use acrylic paint. I usually put my fabric on wax paper and paint one side, hang it on a table, wait it, let it dry, then I flip it over and paint the other side. I drew out the trampoline as it would appear on the boat, marking the holes where the grommets would go and where the ropes would go. I taped it to the painted fabric and poked holes for the string and grommets. I used some vinyl from a binder in order to create the circles for the grommets. I glued them on the vinyl and I used a drill to make the holes. Then I cut out the pattern. I used some tubing and glued it to the side so when I inserted it, it would be tight. I used my photo reference to make sure that the string pattern was correct. Attaching the trampoline to the boat, I put the two hulls into a cradle, positioned them to make sure they were even. I put sandpaper on the hulls where the frame posts were going to go. I moved the frame back and forth, sanding the bottom of the posts so they would go flush against the hull. Once I was sure I had a good fit against the hull, then I checked and lined everything up, and I put super glue on the bottom of the post. I weighted it and let it dry. So the main portion of the boat was completed. It was now time to build the mast. Building the sail mast. To build the mast, I used the same technique as I did the frame. I used the plastic from the report cover, and I inserted a dowel that I had sanded to shape to slide in the plastic sleeve. I had to use two report covers and a long dowel in order to make the mast the height that I needed. I also attached a piece of basswood to the outside of the plastic to create the front of the sail mast. I sanded that to shape. On one end, I created a shape for the top of the mast. I used basswood to create the round shape. I took the wood pieces at the bottom and cut it in order to create a shape for stepping the mast. Once I had done that, I checked to make sure that it would fit into the mast step on the frame. There was no need to glue it. The shroud lines would hold it later. Making the sail. In order to create the sails, I used the material that was provided with the model. In order to paint the sail, I used special paints called Dynaflow paints. They're made for fabrics. This was a nylon material, and when you paint on material, it tends to bleed. So in order to stop that, I used art masking fluid. I drew pencil lines along where the panels would be. I painted with the masking fluid along those lines and created a dike so the paint would not flow beyond where I wanted it to go. Once the paint is dried, you can remove the art masking fluid with some mineral spirits. Next step will be trimming the sail out of the material. Where the sail connects to the mast and the boom, I left some extra material so that I could fold it over, insert into the sail mast. The sail battens were created by taking fabric and folding it over plastic strips and music wire, trimming it to size, and supergluing it on the sail. And you can bend the music wire so that it looks like the sail is full of air. I added letters to the sail by using pressed down letters from the arts and crafts store. The H for the Hobie Cat logo was created out of an extra spot in the pressed down lettering. Building the sail boom. The technique for building the sail boom is the same as building the mast. You'll use the report cover plastic along with wood in order to fashion the boom. The wood inserted into the boom should allow enough room for the sail to be inserted. You need to fashion ends on the end of the boom in order to hold the sail and the ropes. Making the block and tackle. I used photos from my old boat to build the block and tackle. Back in 1974, the block and tackle was pretty simple. So using the photos, I drew up a design. I used polystyrene plastic. I cut out the design, and I used small wood dowels to create the pulleys. I superglued them together, and I used some silver cover vinyl in order to put some metal stripes on the side. Once that was done, it was time for the rigging. Rigging the Hobie Cat. At this point, you should be able to assemble the entire sail along with the boom. With the sail assembled as one unit, you can add rope for the halyard, and you can also add rope for securing the boom down. The cleats that you see in the picture, I fashioned out of wood. I put a piece of wire into the cleats, drilled a hole in the mast, inserted the wire, and superglued it. That gave me some strength, so when I put tension on the rope, it wouldn't pull out. The sail is only supported by 3 wires. There's 2 on the side of the frame. There's 1 on the front that comes down and splits into 2 on the hull. The wire I used was jewelry wire that I bought at Michael's Arts and Crafts. The wire is simply looped around, and there's little beads that you slide on, and you can squeeze with a pair of pliers to make them snug. There's also wire hooks that I bought. These you can just drill a hole, insert them, super glue them, and use that to secure the wires on the hull and the frame. The block and tackle. I would suggest you add the sheet line to the block and tackle before putting on the boom. There's a traveler that goes in the track, and it's made of polystyrene and super glued. There is also a sheet line swivel cam cleat that's attached at the center of the traveler. You'll need to design these parts. They did not come with the kit. Building the rudders. The rudder assembly has several parts. There's the rudder itself. Then you have tubing that's coming off the rudders. There's a connecting crossbar, and there's a tiller. These are created by using plastic tubing and inserting music wire, bending them to shape, and then painting them silver. The rudders that came with the kit are very simple. I wanted something more detailed like the real rudders. So I drew it out on wood, cut it out, and did a few prototypes until I got the right size and shape for the rudder. Once I had the rudder shape worked out, I painted them white and silver. I drilled a hole so a needle could go through and attach it to the boat. The pin goes inside the brass tube and holds the rudder on. Adding a figure to the boat. I purchased this mannequin on eBay. It's very flexible and it's easy to pose in positions that you need. It's about 5¾ inches to 6 inches tall. It's ideal for 1 inch to a foot scale. Make sure you get the kit that comes with many hand positions. I put the mannequin on my finished boat, pose him in the sailing position. I use super glue in the joints to lock him in the position. I use medium super glue because it's thick and it fills the gap and it doesn't run like the thin glue. I also use flex tips to get into the joints without making a mess. Once the mannequin is dry, I take him to my work area and I start using epoxy clay to reinforce the pose. The mannequin comes with shoes, so I had to cut that off, trim the shoes, and use the epoxy clay to create feet. I also used the clay to make hair, eyebrows, and mustache. I covered all gaps that were not going to be covered by clothing. Anything where skin would be showing has to be sanded smooth. Once I have that done, then I paint the mannequin. Once I have painted him, I start adding clothing. I add fabric to create shorts, glue it in position with super glue. I didn't super glue the arms around the shoulders so that I can adjust the arms when it's on the model. I used acrylic blue paint in order to paint the shorts. I use wax paper to protect the arm while I'm building this shirt. I want the arms to remain free so that I can adjust them on the model. I use the pattern of a t-shirt. I cut it in pieces and create the shirt around the body. Once it's done, I add a coat of paint to the shirt to make it white. And the last step is I use matte varnish to take the shine off the figure. I hope you've enjoyed this video and have been inspired to build your own boat. Good luck and happy modeling. If you're a model builder, check out my 3D collection on imaterialize.com. Links in the description.